All right, so I am gonna go ahead and share my screen. Um, okay. So I have a couple files that kind of use to showcase sort of the way that I personally use Figma, and then I have some resources too to share out that are good learning tools on sort of overall capabilities and to get a little bit more sort of hands-on practice with some of what it can do. So there's two. Sorry, my dog is deciding to cry. If you guys hear any whining. So there's two main sort of sides to Figma. There's the Figma like actual design tool, and then there is the FigJam, which is a whiteboarding tool, but it's my personally favorite whiteboarding tool because of how easy it is to just pull things from one file to another. They have, if you look down here, you can do sticky notes. You can draw various boxes, and then they also integrate with some templates. So I'll run like ideation workshops in these files, create mood boards in these files. And then there's widgets that you can add as well to do make notes, track tasks, etc. So, and I primarily use it for wireframing and doing wireframing flows. So this is an e-commerce site that I'm working on, and I did the initial wireframes in FigJam. And then, the wireframes and then the user flows to show how the pages will move into each other. And you can, just like everything else with FigJam, it's really easy to share it out. And then to kind of collaborate with other stakeholders, people can can either, collaboratively work in this file with another designer, or have a client or a developer kind of leave their own comments and sticky notes and sort of work back and forth that way. So coming over into an actual design file. So this is same project, but now the actual like in progress design file. There's two sort of types of files in FigJam. There is your design file, and then there's another type of file called a library, which you can turn any file into a library by just choosing to publish it. So this one's already published, but it has an option up at the top tab to do that. And this is where I typically store my components. You can store masters and components in your actual design file as well. Kind of just depends on if it's going to be for me a once and done project, or if I foresee working with the client over a broader like sort of set of collateral where I would need to access that design elements across different files. But it's very similar. It's page based, and then create. Here's a good one to show. So this is kind of one of the powerful aspects of Figma, is the ability to create your masters in the sort of recommended format that Figma and a lot of other designers tend to suggest, is you create a master with sort of every thing in it that would need to show up in your variations, and then you can create the states off of that. So you can see I have them labeled the sort of matrix of the states, and over here with the properties. So my active state, if it's emptied or has a value in it, if there's the value, and then the type, so with a button, without a button, if it's search, you can see similar, but like a little bit more simple with the checkbox, just goes between two states, selected or unselected. And then, the larger, like then the next level of that pairs that with the label. And then adding a variant is really easy. So that is, you can just duplicate any of them with the little plus sign, and then give it your do like focused. You can give it the new name, and then you just click in and you change whatever you want about it, any of the styles. And then when you use it and set it in a design file, it will show up as such. So we'll say, I'll switch the green to a poppy for the focused state. And you can publish it. And when you go back in here, anytime that there's changes, it gives you like an alert to let you review them. So you can kind of do a double check, and that helps again with the collaboration overlap to make sure that, if two people are making changes, you're able to kind of control what gets actually activated when. And you can see if I wanted to change the state of that, I would just over here, it just gives me a drop down and lets me change the state of that. So it's pretty easy to use and to kind of pull things back and forth. And then in the actual design file, there's a lot of, you have all of your like standard device sizes set up already added. You can have, as many pages as you want, which lets you kind of organize. So I have it currently split up by home and then the shopping pages, and there'll probably be a couple more folders by the time I'm done with this. And then again, you can share it out. And you can set, which is nice, you can set edit view or just to view the prototypes. So you can kind of control who's actually having edit access versus who is just can see it and then comment on it. So another really great way to collect feedback, sharing this out, and then clients can leave comments with, or developers can leave comments with questions and other things. And then as a quick, so there's the prototype tool. I don't use the prototype tool very often. I don't find it to be useful enough, intuitive enough on the like prototype reviewing side for it to really add value to most like client or sort of developer handoffs. I will use it to record like a video demo of the screen where I can kind of clean it up then myself after the fact. But for just live demoing, I don't really go into that very much. So I know some people really love it. It just has never really fully jived with my workflow. And then the inspect tool is what a lot of is the developer tool that a lot of people rely on. So different ways to view the CSS, generate CSS blocks, and then as you kick in, you can get more and more specific. So that's super powerful for the devs, and that is all still accessible in the view only mode. So you don't have to give devs like edit access or anything for them still to be able to click around and find styles.
Say, Molly?
So, yes.
So were you, it's pretty interesting. So were you like defining styles on that previous page with the input elements, and then the styles are being applied here on these? Like, is that what's happening? Or over there? Pardon me?
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, that was my question. Are you defining styles here, which are then being applied on those like demo pages on the other slide? Is that what's happening?
Yes, that's good. And
nice.
You don't have to make things as masters. For me, and again, it kind of depends on how large the site is. Like if I was just doing a simple one-page site, having the variants would be a little overkill. And if I'm doing the design and the development as well, I'm probably going to be more inclined to cut some corners there. For this project, I'm not doing the development of it. I have to hand off development. So I am working a little bit harder to have everything sort of tied back to one place so that a developer can see everything in context. And then they can also look at this file and see everything the way that all the styles transform, sort of matrixed out.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm going to have another question, which is kind of related to what I was asking before. So when you got all these defined, what will it deliver for you as an output package that you can use? Style sheets, or what does it do? That, but you don't have to answer that now, but that's what I'll be wondering. Thank you.
There's probably some plugins. I have one plugin that I was gonna share, because it was made by the like CMS platform. I have never done like a full generative export. I know there are plugins that do kind of take this and would export it in HTML, CSS, but that's not going to be able to be translated to a CMS system. That would just be the static code, and that would usually the plugins they'll maybe get you like 70% of the way there, but it'll never be 100% yet. They're not good enough to do that. So, but they do render the CSS. So it makes it very explicit when you click into something. And it shows, so I have one of the other tools that I was going to share a resource on is the auto layout. It's my favorite tool of Figma. And so, the CSS that gets rendered per element will, it even gives you the Flexbox sort of rules to render it like it looks there.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So getting into some of the resources. So I'm going to start with actually sharing out this Instagram account that I follow. This guy, it's not all specific to Figma. He does shares out a lot of different sort of things, but Figma is his design tool. And so he shares out a lot of Figma resources, which is what I kind of specifically follow for. So like he posts slideshows with different Figma plugins. So things that he's found, like plugins to generate design resources. I learned about this plugin through his Instagram account. There's now an official ChatGPT plugin for Figma to be able to like generate text and everything. So if you're kind of one step up from just a basic lorem ipsum, you can now sort of generate some placeholders, some more like contextual placeholder text from Figma instead of going back and forth. Another copy tool, symbols. I haven't tried all of these. But in general, this guy does post, he only talks about plugins that he's used and found value from. So I find that the plugins and the resources that he shares tend to, for me, be a little bit better and more valuable, I find, when I actually try them out than, just basic like medium lists of new plugins that the person writing the article hasn't always vetted themselves. So this is a good follow for new resources. Figma themselves has a huge resource database, tons of articles. It talks about, the different like drawing tools. It goes through all the different types of properties, how to like apply those properties. It breaks down the auto layout, working with images, color, type, different like system preferences, which some of these I actually didn't even know were possible, like an option, until I was pulled up this page earlier. Breaks down styles, components, and libraries, which is that was the file that I showed that had like all the inputs laid out that you can kind of you can set the variance to. So it breaks down into like their kind of recommended ways to structure those. There's a whole section just in prototyping. You can add videos apparently now. This is a new feature. There's a way to add actual videos instead of just a screen still into prototypes. So this is a really good spot to start to just kind of learn what Figma offers and their recommended ways of using it. And then you can kind of expand into, the ways different designers and developers are using the tool for themselves. Touching on the auto layout, because like I said, this is one of my favorite tools. So this basically lets you auto layout. It sort of lets you define a layout grid essentially, but it lets you set different rules to it that'll actually allow it to sort of shrink and expand. So it reduces the amount of times that you have to remake something for an adaptive view, because it can like shrink and flex. You can change from horizontal to vertical depending on the viewport as well. So this one is very cool. You can set your alignment. This is your orientation. So is it going up or down, left to right, the gap between items, and then your padding around the four sides. And then they have a little like example of how that works. And you can see as they duplicate those items, it keeps all of the spacing and the sizing consistent. It's another one using the actual canvas to change your paddings. Going through some of the different controls. Controlling it through the sidebar, lots of different ways to do that. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. There we go. Getting through distribution. Oh my gosh. Sorry, guys. Alignment options, distribution options. There's a lot of different options for the auto layout, and I would highly, highly, highly recommend if you take one thing to sort of play around with. I think it should be auto layout. It was weird. It was weird for me at first starting to use it, but now it's second nature, and I could not live without it. I think this GIF is the resizing that does not want to play. Never mind. Yeah, so I'll share out this this article so you can kind of dig into that more, because it is a really good breakdown. So getting into then though the design systems. So again, that second file I was showing, when you are working on a bigger project and you need to have consistency between your components. There's so many different methodologies on how to structure a design library. I roughly follow the atomic design system. So atoms, molecules, organisms, and then templates and pages. So you can kind of see that in this working file I have. I start with defining my sort of like my branding. So colors, logos, typography. And then the atoms are just, the icons, selectors, and then getting up into molecules, things like CTAs and inputs. And then organisms are where I start to like really group everything together for like the header, where you're pulling in multiple different other components all into one.
It's sort of like a block or a widget.
Yeah, it's exactly corresponds. Yes, it exactly corresponds to a widget. And that's sort of how I try to think about it. So like looking at this is going to be a Shopify site, right? Like I don't have these turned into components yet, but like this master, this would be that entire header section. This would be that entire footer section. These will be, again, different types of blocks. So we have like the individual blocks, but then put together, that could be a larger block that has multiple widgets in it. So again, you can kind of it helps to draw parity, in my opinion, like as someone that sits on sort of both sides of the process. It's really nice to kind of break down from the smallest component that's being used a lot of places to those big components that are being used to then actually put the pages together. This is a good article that I pulled that just sort of breaks down like a kind of easy way of building components and building design systems. So it kind of talks more in depth about some of like the very like kind of cursory level things that I mentioned. Like having variants, explains how the default variant is selected, and that's what kind of shows up in your previews. Nesting, having libraries, all the different options for, you know, actually implementing everything. And then some demo videos that, you know, if anyone's interested, they can watch. Okay, so getting into more of the sort of developer specific side of Figma. The first plugin, I have not used this yet. This launched very recently on Product Hunt. I noted it immediately, but I haven't had a Webflow project in the past like month to test this out on, and I haven't had the time to just do it for fun. So if anyone does work in Webflow and tries this out, I'm very curious to like get some actual like sort of personal opinions, reports back on that. But this is a plugin from Webflow. It's not third party. It's new, so it's still, I think, technically in beta. And from my understanding of it, the limitations are that it cannot bring over your adaptive views. It'll only bring over like your desktop layout. And then from there, you would still have to manually in Webflow reduce everything down. But it is supposed to, according to their Product Hunt launch page, it's supposed to bring over all of those essentially like blocks and widgets and sort of port at least the desktop view of everything into Webflow for then you to set up the other one. So might be some kind of cut down on work. And Richard, like this kind of is sort of aligned with what you were asking about. It's kind of what that the export is. You know, I mentioned that there's one plugin that I was going to show. This is it, because this is the only plugin that I know of and that I've found that is actually created by the end platform. So like Webflow, it's not a hack that someone else has made. Webflow has actually developed this to work within their system, and assuming that it is popular, they will probably hopefully keep updating it. So this one, I'm very excited to have an opportunity to try out this plugin and see if it makes the initial process of building that first version of everything from the design software to the CMS, if that makes that faster.
Cool.
And then the other resource that I had was just a Smashing Magazine article, specifically looking at Figma for developers. So not really talking about, you know, the design process at all, but just specifically how to navigate the developer tools of it, and, you know, keyboard shortcuts, getting into the project styles, and the element styles, finding things. So this is a good overview for sort of just focusing on the development side of things, where you don't really ever need to go into the design side of the file. Gives a good overview. All right. Does anyone have any questions that I can answer or go back over anything?
Well, I'd like to ask. Go ahead, Terry. Please go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna ask if you've because I know a lot of people use like Adobe XD. How would you have you used Adobe XD, and how would you compare Figma to Adobe XD?
Oh, Figma blows Adobe XD out of the water. To be fair, I haven't used Adobe XD in a couple years. But so I can't exactly speak for XD now. But in my opinion, Figma blows out of the water, and Figma is the most accessible at this point. It's the most accessible collaborative design software. I know with XD, I used to be able to share files, but there was no actual like co-working mode of them. I don't know if that's something that they've added or not, but with Figma, you know, all could be in one file right now working. And we would see where our mouses were. We would see what screens we were working on. So no, not to overlap, but we could all truly be in one file working and seeing what each other is doing in real time. So I've started using Figma as my primary tool this past year, and I started using it for that collaboration purpose, and it made everything a million times easier and faster. And then I quickly fell in love with its full capabilities and converted.
Cool. All right. Great. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I like the part on the back end, Figma to Webflow. So let me ask you one about the front end. This may sound strange to the people here. It may sound familiar, but I've kind of grown up doing lots of manual work, pad and pencil. So for example, developing business applications where there are storyboards of one screen flows to the next, and this is how the information develops and goes into the system for use. And so I have found that, at least for me personally, and for a lot of the people I know, it's a lot faster to do initial versions of things with a pad and pencil and just joyously going to work, scribbling out the flows, or maybe we'll even do it on a whiteboard and maybe tighten it up on pad and pencil. And then at a certain point you reach where, and we've gotten used to developing these things pretty nicely. They can be pretty nice and neat if you practice it, but they do reach a certain point where you go, this is getting too complex to keep redrawing. So now at this point, we'd like to load these into wireframes. So have you ever seen anything for Figma that would allow you to take neat hand sketches of wireframes or storyboards or state change diagrams and go, okay, now load this all in, and now we want to start working it in Figma?
I don't know, Zoe. So I essentially kind of cut out the hand sketch phase personally with FigJam, because it is, to me, FigJam, it feels very much like sort of more hand drawing, and it has a very easy sort of flow capabilities to it. So I use FigJam a lot for my hand sketching and wireframing all in one phase. And that's sort of where I tool and I play with that. And then from there, I just move over to the Figma, and I start building everything in a formal high fidelity. As for if you do want to start with hand sketching, because I that is still a different tactile experience.
Right.
I would say there might be plugins that would do that. I'm just not familiar with them, but you could also probably very easily drop those images into a FigJam and then use the drawing tools to sort of sketch over them to make the wireframes.
Yeah, good to know. Thanks. I appreciate that. I'd like to ask another question, but I don't want to hold up other people. So I'm not familiar with plugins for Figma. I thought Figma is what we call a SaaS, a software as a service capability. So how do you install a plugin to Figma?
Let me pull that back up. Figma is known for their plugin capability. Everything in Figma is built off of JSON. This entire file is from a massive JSON string. And so because of that, it makes it very easy. They've done that intentionally. It makes it very easy to essentially, build plugins. Anyone can build a plugin. If you know JSON, and you can write a plugin and add in functionality that you feel like is missing otherwise. So the plugins are, you can access plugins quickly from up here. You can see some of your components. You can also see your components over in the sidebar. So 2 ways to access components. And there's widgets. So I don't use widgets as much in the Figma file as I do in FigJam. But I use plugins a lot in the Figma file. So a common one that I use is the lorem ipsum. Once you use it, it'll show up if you right click and go to plugins. Everything that you've recently used shows up. So I use this lorem ipsum one a lot. If I put in a type text, and then I can just choose sentences, add, then I can resize it. So that's an example of a really basic plugin. Other plugins, right? There's accessibility. This is the Fig GPT plugin. There's one even for font awesome icons, although they don't have all of them, so I didn't really find much value in that. Some different ones you can see. I was trying to build an animated SVG in Figma. The plugins were not as advanced as I needed them to be, but for a simple one, for just moving an SVG animation, you can even do that in Figma through a plugin. And then you can do like stock images. So you get a lot of stuff in here. Like if you want to just stock images, like Pexels, I think Unsplash probably has a plugin. A lot are free. Some do require a subscription. Just kind of depends. And then if you go over to the community, there's the community tab. You can start to see, so down here in this by the community, for the community, you can kind of do some filters, but this will show you, like right now it's such a trending. So this shows all of like the really popular plugins right now. And there's,
sorry to interrupt. This is very interesting. I mean, I guess the way I've used Figma is as the SaaS version, the software as a service version. It looks like you're using a application that you've installed on your computer. Is that right?
oh, so you've used it in web-based.
Yes, web-based.
Yes. The full functionality, and this is one of the best things about Figma is there is no difference in functionality between the web and the desktop versions. It's 100% functionality is the same. So that again, Omar, I think I'd forgotten to say this, but it was in my head with the your question about XD versus Figma, and like the collaboration aspect. XD, right? You still need if you are going to collaborate, both parties still need an Adobe Creative Cloud license. They need the software downloaded. Figma, you don't. Figma, you can share it out with someone. Developers never need to download the software to view everything. A client that you just want to participate in a Fig Jam, they don't need to download anything. It's entirely platform agnostic, operating system agnostic. As long as the browser can run it, you can use it.
Right.
Thank you.
Nice.
But for me
yeah,
personally, it's easier because I'm in it, all day, every day. It's easier for me to use the downloaded version.
Cool.
Do you mean you use it usually on desktop or the web-based?
I use it on desktop primarily.
Yeah, no, this is so cool. I mean, I've seen the auto layout on files that I've worked with, and how like the components stay on the bottom when you size things up, and buttons, and all the library, the masters and stuff. And I just had to go backwards from there and see how they work. So this is great to kind of get an overall view. And I will check out what auto layout and the developer. Developer and design, it's kind of overwhelming every time I try to build out my own files or build out some designs, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, this is frustrating. I'm going to build it out myself. So I know how useful that design part is, especially when you're collaborating with other people. So it's great to kind of get that full process going of doing everything out in the design section, and then bringing it over, especially when you're collaborating with other people, so they know what is going on.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say too, Rick, when I first started trying to use Figma, I wanted to know I wanted to be able to to use all the functionalities right away. And I overwhelmed myself, trying to learn not just how the layout tools worked, but also how the variants and the components and everything. And it made it a lot more overwhelming and complicated. So I would say, don't worry about making sure everything is like formal in a master and everything. The functionality is there. And there's also really great plugins to take things that aren't masters and then like organize them and like send them back into masters. But I would say just start with getting used to layouts and auto layouts, and then play around with maybe the masters and the components a little bit separately. And then, you can then merge them together in a separate project down the road, or replace some of the uncomponentized instances in a project later on. And but if you try to learn all of it at once, it's a little overwhelming.
Yeah, I think I would look at some files in the community library. I mean, they're so helpful because everything's kind of built out first, and then just like unmaster, uncomponent, like a lot of them to get them, because I know they're connected to other objects. Objects, and yeah, just kind of, like I said, just move backwards and try to figure out how they work. So this will be fun when I take the time out to kind of go through a lot of the files. And
there's also, if you search in the community, you can usually find like kind of basic like simple design systems and like design libraries that other designers have already created as sort of a starting point, and then you can use them as is, or you can take the file and then just go through and apply your own styles to it. And then get just comfortable with using like the structure of the variants is already there, and you can just change the styles to be the brand that you want. But then you'll have like, it's kind of like a little bit of a cheat way, and you'll be able to sort of start to see how everything works without trying to build it from the ground up. And a lot of designers actually, they just that's what they'll do, or they'll create their own. And then for every project, they just duplicate that and apply on the styles. And I would like to have that at some point, like a base design library that I always start a project with and just apply that client's branding to it. But that will be a lot of hours that I haven't had time to dedicate yet. So
I'm starting to do that with WordPress, like the starter sites that have everything already built in. So you can just, with that. And I know you worked with FigJam too. Like, do you do that collaborative with other people, just getting the ideas and kind of layout first? Can you kind of go over how that?
Yeah. Here, let me actually share out a FigJam link. Can start a new one. Here, let me share my screen as I start it. All right. Share. And then copy. Oh, all right. Okay, so I just sent a link to a FigJam in the chat if everyone wants to jump in there and kind of play around with it a little bit and see how you kind of see what it looks like in collaboration mode also. So a new FigJam always starts with kind of these like templates set up. You don't need to have one, but they are helpful. Like I said earlier, I do use some of the templates for like running workshops and stuff, like little brainstorming sessions. But you have sticky notes that you can pull out from the bottom. So on the bottom bar is sort of all of the little like graphic elements that you have. So you can add in a sticky note, and when you pull out a sticky note, it says who created it also, which is really convenient. So if you're doing any kind of if you're like leaving feedback or doing any kind of workshopping where, like in a physical room, people would be writing things on sticky notes, but you're doing it digitally, exactly who's leaving what message, which is super, super helpful. Richard, the way that I sketch in here is I go over to the square tool and then I change things to black, no fill, just the border. And then I just start drawing things out. You can type. You can change text sizes. I'll use like solid colored squares to sort of represent colored blocks or assets, kind of lay everything out. And this is just, this is the most efficient, like, aside from literally drawing with a Sharpie on a whiteboard, this is probably the most efficient wireframing process that I've ever used. So I'll go through these, and then the flow features are built in. So when you click on one element, it'll have the dots on it, and then you can just drag it to another one. So you can show relation. And you can really build out a design, like a wireframe design very quickly. And then this is the first step of my design process where, you know, I'll build this out and then I'll review with the client. And this phase is nice too, because, you know, we can kind of live workshop stuff around because it is so quick and easy to just break things apart and rebuild them. And then, you know, once I get that sort of like approval on the wireframes, then I'll move into high fidelity.
Are you using a trackpad or just good old mouse?
Either one. I love a trackpad, but for the health and safety of my wrist, when I'm at my large monitor, I do use a mouse.
Gotcha.
There's a super cool feature that I really like about Figma and FigJam that is actually, I don't know if you can do, yes. So if you click on someone's, so I clicked on Emily. If you click on someone's profile picture at the top of the screen, at the top right, it puts you into follow mode. So this is also a really convenient way to share and talk through a document without having a screen share. So everybody in a meeting can click follow on one person, and then as that person moves around the screen, the view that I'm seeing follows them. So if anyone's looking at the screen that I'm sharing, they'll see I'm not touching anything, but FigJam is following Emily around as she moves and interacts with things. And I think you can do that in a regular Figma file as well. I'm pretty sure it works across everything.
And that's mostly to track changes and edits and
yeah, like
yeah.
Emily was like walking through something. She was the designer, she was presenting it. Rather than looking at Figma through screens, you could have, you know, I could just track her as she walks through it. And then I'm not trying to like follow along as much. Kind of keep track of where she is. So that's kind of just like an optional collaboration. The second that I click on something and interact with something, the follow is broken. So the follow, like my action overrides the follow, but if I'm not interacting with anything, then I can follow someone as they maybe like talk through something or demo a flow.
I've used that for on actual Figma files when designers and developers are like working on different sections. Yeah, like at first I was just like, that's going to get so confusing when we're you know, working on different sections, but it's so helpful to have access, at least access. But yeah.
Yeah, you can find people very quickly. I've used that too also just to like I'm like live design like live working in a file and like I might be on the phone with the other designer and they're like, "Oh, like what do you think of this?" And rather than try to like zoom out and zoom back in and find them, I can just click their icon and it'll just like pop me right to where they are, which is so convenient. One other, this is actually, I almost forgot about this. I just discovered this recently. A really cool thing that I never knew about. So I'm gonna just use the Smashing Magazine article. If you export a web page as PDF, I think it works if you take any PDF, but I discovered it through just trying to save a screenshot of a website. Now this only works if you pull it into FigJam. If you pull it into regular Figma, this doesn't happen. It brings it in as an image. But if you drag in a PDF of a screen of a website into FigJam, when it imports, it should, there we go. Oh, that is a rough PDF. All right, well, I guess that didn't want to work today. Sometimes when I pulled in an exported web page, it will bring in yeah, there's stuff back there. It'll bring in I don't know why that one's not working, but sometimes when you bring in a web page as a PDF, like there's some content, it should in FigJam bring in the web page as all of the individual assets that are in it. So if you need to like rip all of the design assets from a website, that's kind of like a little bit of a cheat way to do it that I discovered. Not foolproof though.
Very cool.
Nice,
Great.
nice, excellent.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you're interested in joining us, click the link down below. See you soon.